be discussing one of my favorite topics, increasing Metabase adoption inside your team. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to chat with other attendees in the chat section and share your ideas for adoption as well. If you have questions for our speakers, please post them in the Q&A section and we'll get to those. With me today is Jean-Mathieu Saponaro, Data and Analytics Engineering Manager from Datadog, and Wayde Herman, Senior Data Analyst at Onefootball. JM, would you mind saying a few words about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation to this Fireside chat. So I'm JM. I'm working at Datadog, who is like an observability company allowing you to monitor and secure your application and infrastructure. I'm supporting multiple teams within the internal analytics department. And to give you like some visibility on what we do, we support 3,000 users within Datadog using Metabase for day-to-day analytics and also more global reporting.
Cool. Hi, my name is Wayde Herman, and I am the Senior Data Analyst at Onefootball. And Onefootball is basically the world's largest, or self-proclaimed world's largest football platform. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today about the best practices of driving adoption of your BI tool, because I think it's a pretty neglected topic. And basically, like from my experience, when you look for resources on the BI layer, they tend to be either like very high level, talking about things like self-service as a concept, or they're like super low level, and they're about things like why you shouldn't be using pie charts in your dashboards. So to be able to contribute something a little bit more practical, a little bit more actionable, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So great. So James, would you like to start us off with some of the things that your team is doing?
Sure. So I think we broke down a few points on how we ensure a good Metabase adoption across Datadog. There are a few that I know that Wayde also had very interesting things to discuss here. Maybe starting with the first one, which is probably the simplest one, I think on our end, is just documentation. Sounds like a bit basic, but like we make sure that people have good documentation that they can easily find about how to leverage Metabase to do analytics and to be more data-driven in their day-to-day job. Making sure that they can easily discover the documentation on how to use Metabase and how to find the reports for their team. We leverage the fact that Metabase is open source, and we added a resource section on the nav bar, on the sidebar, actually, where people can find like links to different type of documentation, whether it's release notes, or also how to import their own data to our data warehouse that they can then explore on Snowflake, but also simply dataset documentations and a user guide that's specific for Datadog, because we have some features that are a bit custom here. We use just Confluence for simple user guides on how to use Metabase. And we also have, like I said, some documentation about specific data sets, making sure that people have all the insights they need when they are exploring a table. And we make sure that also knowledge is shared among individual teams. So we work with, we call them ambassadors, but basically they are partners in other teams. They make sure that they have also their own documentation about their own reports, and that any new hire during their onboarding phase is aware that we use Metabase at Datadog as a primary BI tool, and that they can easily connect to it and find what they need. And so in terms of onboarding, we also make sure that any new employee receive automatically an email after 30 days saying, hey, like now you figure out what you want to do, what you're going to do in your job, you need data, and this is how you can access data. Maybe where you have similar things on your end.
Let me share my screen. So I think just before I jump into our documentation, I think an important piece of context to let you know is that at Onefootball, we try to run our data team like a product team, which is quite a common approach. So what this means is that we try to treat our BI layer as a product, and we borrow like the best practices and approaches from the product world, right? So what this means is being user-centric, focusing on our users, on their use cases. It means thinking about things like customer support, marketing, and it also means like including the critical step of defining and measuring success, right? And the reason why I'm telling you that is because that approach really did define this tactic in particular, the way we do our documentation, and also some of the other tactics that we will talk about a little bit later. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is basically like it's called our getting started dashboard, right? So from our knowledge of product analytics, we know that a critical part of product adoption is like the onboarding process, right? And so before we had this dashboard, we had our documentation in Confluence, like JM and Datadog. But we didn't have this smoothed out as much as sending an email after 30 days. So like the processes weren't as sorted out. So this is I guess our answer to that problem, right? Yeah, like basically what would happen is people would come join the company, and maybe they would search and find the Confluence docs, or hopefully they'd be linked to it by their line manager, or hopefully they would join our Slack channel and see like information about Metabase there. But sometimes they would miss all of these, right? And so they would just land up on Metabase, open it up, and be quite lost. So while we had all of this documentation and we did all of our homework, we didn't have the information where the user needed it, right? So that's basically the inspiration of this dashboard. A second issue that we're trying to solve here is that a big pain point we found in our users' experience was basically discovery, right? So we found that despite us being very thoughtful about the way we presented our information, about how we planned our collections, and how we even refactored these when necessary, we found that like just because our project is so mature, it often became like quite difficult to navigate for newcomers and also existing users, right? So basically, we try to solve these two problems by building this dashboard with the primary goal of streamlining the onboarding process, right? And a secondary goal of letting new and existing users know about important dashboards. Yeah, so on the left-hand side, you can see the focus more on the onboarding, which is the top of our dashboard, right? So what we do is we link to our Metabase video tutorial series, which we'll cover a little bit later. We also cover like, how to ask for help, which is quite important, links to our Metabase dedicated Slack channel. And then we also have additional resources over here which give you context about data analytics in general, right? So it's things about like our data stack. It's things like the metric framework that we use at Onefootball, right? Like explaining those kind of things, like everything that a user needs to really understand the data. And then on the right-hand side, this is where we try and introduce our dashboards. So at the top, we have a manually curated section, which is basically over here. We have our core dashboards, which is pretty interesting. And then at the top, we also have our featured dashboards. So as you can see right now, the World Cup is going on. We're a football company, as you can understand, like the World Cup's like our Black Friday, right? So lots of people within the company are currently very interested in the World Cup. And so it made sense for us to centralize all of the tracking of these different things that people are doing in one place. I actually think this is worth just touching on a little bit further. This is like a smaller tactic that we use to drive adoption, right? So we knew that everyone would be interested in the World Cup. We knew that everyone was going to be doing their own thing. And we thought that this was a cool time for us to just centralize these things, make people look at it all in one place, make them aware of the other data that we have, not just the data that they would be looking at. And yeah, it's like, riding the wave of interest for the World Cup for driving Metabase adoption. It's us being like salespeople, I guess. And then at the bottom, we have the section for popular and new dashboards, right? And so as you can see, I changed some of this information because I wasn't sure what I'm allowed to show and what I'm not. But here we use a Metabase's metadata to basically populate like trending dashboards, like what's popular at the moment, and also new dashboards. Yeah, and so far we found this tactic to be working quite well. And I'm going to minimize that. Yeah, that's that. We're finding it quite well, working quite well, and also like this is going to be something that we constantly iterate on. Like it won't be finished. And over to you, JM.
Yeah, I like the fact that you talk about discovery of content because I think that's super important on our end. I think we really want to basically minimize the time where in between, like when someone has a question, how fast can they get the answer with data? And so I think be able to discover very easily an existing report, all the data that's going to answer this question is super important. And so we invested a lot, especially over the past few months, on reports and data discovery. I can show a few examples here. So what I call report discovery first is, again, like you land on Metabase, when can you quickly find like what you're going to be interested in? And so same thing we use, we have a front engineer working with us. We take the advantage of Metabase being open source, and we can tweak the code, especially on the front end. So on the home page, we have this feature, which really looks like what you have, Wayde, on your dashboard, where we have the most popular dashboard for a specific team. So we are able to detect which department a user is part of using Metabase user attributes. And we can show, like, based on basically views and queries, the top dashboards, top questions, and also the top users. So people can then ask questions to these people. Part of reports discovery, of course, there is also the organization of the collections. So when we migrated to Metabase a couple of years ago, we had the opportunity to start from scratch. So we put a lot of thought in how we wanted to organize the content to avoid it to become the Wild West. What we decided is to organize reports based on data domain rather than teams, because team can change, especially at Datadog is growing super fast, and teams can change. Also, multiple teams can be interested in the same type of data and report. So we organize that by data domain. Like you will see engineering, finance, project and billing is interesting. Like people who are going to use product and billing can be product managers, engineers working on product, marketing, execs, customer success managers. So that's why we organize that. And of course, we take advantage of the feature that Metabase released a few months ago about like marking content officials. So people can see, when they see the blue ribbon here, they know that content in this collection is built and maintained by Data Analyst versus content that can be created by the rest of the company. And then data discovery. So same thing, we kind of like built our own mini data catalog / data discovery feature within Metabase. When people arrive, they have on the nav bar a button where they can, we can see it like at the top right, where they can browse data. And when they click on that, they just land on the search page where they just type a keyword and they can see all the data sets and the fields corresponding to their search with all the metadata that's going to give them all the context they need. So what's the data source, how often the data set is refreshed, when it was refreshed last, and also just links to all the questions and dashboard leveraging this table. And under the hood here, how it works is that it's basically any table that is exposed on Metabase is just a YAML piece of code that our data engineers and analytics engineers basically maintain. And we make sure that there are descriptions everywhere. And that's also where we manage the metadata that Metabase leverage for all the stuff like filters. So yeah, it's super important for us to make sure that people can find easily information, because it's not only about, to us, adoption is about being aware that Metabase exists and that it can answer questions, but also be able to have a nice experience of finding answers really fast, because then people will be happy and they will come back to the tool. I don't know if you have anything to add on your end.
Yeah, no, I'm just very jealous. That looks amazing. That data discovery tool looks really cool. Yeah, I found, like, when you were talking about the collections and planning it, something that we found is that we also had a very good framework for how we would do it. And then we noticed that, this thing doesn't fit in the framework. We're just going to add it here, and we're going to do this thing there. And yeah, it quickly got out of hand. And I think like if you don't keep an eye on that sort of thing, like it does turn into quite a mess. And so like for us, refactoring it was quite a good solution to that kind of problem. Just basically constantly making sure that it is easy to navigate. So I think what would be cool is if I quickly talk about our video tutorial section, because I think that's quite interesting. And I think, a lot of teams approach this, they have like a data academy or data curriculum or something. And like, this is our answer to that. So basically, we like when we moved over to Metabase, because we used to use Tableau. When we moved over to Metabase, we used to have these bi-weekly workshops, right? And so what would happen is everyone in the company could sign up, and we would give them like a hands-on walkthrough of Metabase. And this would cover the basics, but also because it was quite like hands-on, we could then also dive into the data that like the audience needed, right? So if they were interested in, I don't know, the marketing data, we would show them the marketing data. And this was quite good, but like as the company grew, obviously these workshops, the size of the workshops just grew, and eventually like didn't really work as well as they initially did. And so like we try to do them more frequently, but this wasn't really feasible because we have quite a relatively small team relative to the rest of the company, right? So what we decided to do to scale our efforts was we made this video training series, right? And essentially what it is we call it Metabase 101, and it's like basically mirrors Metabase's own documentation, but it's using the Onefootball data, right? So it's, it's a familiar face talking about our data, but it's covering the topics that that Metabase covers itself, which I think is a cool hack. You don't have to come up with these curriculums yourself, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but maybe just like layer it with like the Onefootball branding and all the stuff like relative for us. And to be honest, like moving over to this approach was quite cool. So yeah, we cover the basics, like I said, and we also cover a lot of the things that we covered that I mentioned in the getting started dashboard. So all of that contextual information is also included. And we found that it worked quite well for some people, and for other people, I definitely saw some resistance, right? Like we definitely got some negative feedback from people who didn't like the async approach. They wanted it to be, their hand to be held a little bit more. So what we did was we do both things. We have like a hybrid approach. We still have the workshops, but they're less frequent. And then obviously we still have our video tutorial series. And we find that this like ticks our boxes because depending on who you are, you can consume the knowledge in the way that you want. And also we could then leverage the questions being asked in the workshops to kind of like iterate on the video tutorial series. So improving Metabase 101 and helping us build Metabase 102, which we are still busy working on. JM, do you want to? I'm pretty sure that your team is doing something similar.
Yeah, totally. Training is super important, and like we talked about awareness, data discovery, but then, as you said, like the goal, the holy grail for any analytics team is to reach the self-serve ecosystem where people are completely autonomous, which is, there are plenty of articles saying that it's kind of impossible to completely fulfill, but we can get as close as possible. And knowledge and training and education is like a huge part of that. So of course, training is important for us too. Something I wanted to say before is that I agree with you, Wayde, is that we try to not reinvent the wheel in terms of documentation and training. Like Metabase has really, really good resource in terms of features, how to use them. So the only documentation we have is for things that are very specific to Datadog. And then for anything that Metabase already document, we just have links to the Metabase documentation. Better because we don't have to maintain it and Metabase just do it for us. Same thing for training. So on our end, training is, we launched last year, the Analytics Academy. Of course, like it was highly inspired by like what other companies are doing. Like Airbnb has like data universities, I think. So we have the Analytics Academy. We try to make it as fun as possible and also have some gamification aspects to it. So there are 3 levels with different, like each level have pretty much 2 classes of pretty much an hour. The first level, Analytics Explorer. That's for users who just, basically it should be for everyone at Datadog, like anyone within the company, any department. You can be working in finance, marketing, you can be at the reception of the company. You might be using data at one point to help in your daily job. So that's for everyone in the company to be able to quickly find answers, find the right dashboard, just apply a few filters, and that's it. So it's Analytics Explorer. The second level, that's where we teach people how to build their own content for their teams and for themselves. That's the Analytics Builder. And finally, so that's hopefully like ideally that would be everyone should go up to the builder. In fact, like we really wish that everyone at least do the first level. And finally, Expert. That's for people who really want to dig in more advanced features on Metabase. I'm thinking about writing SQL questions. So we even like do an introduction to SQL in the builder class, and we do more advanced SQL features in the expert level. And here we teach more advanced Metabase features like using custom expressions, using variables in SQL questions on Metabase. And as you said, so we tried also the approach of having videos and live sessions. One thing we struggle with videos is that we release new features often on Metabase, on our data, and also Metabase just releases new features. So it's really hard to have something that's always up to date. So in the end, we decided to have side-by-side the documentation that's easier to maintain than a video to record every time, and these live classes. So I think right now we give the Analytics Explorer class, the first level, every month, builders every 2 months, experts every quarter. Of course, as Datadog keeps growing, we're thinking about how to scale this Analytics Academy. But yeah, anyway, today I think we have more like about 300 people who completed the Explorer class, and that's just in like 4 quarters. Yeah, and in the gamification aspect, again, like tweaking a bit the UI on Metabase. So when people land on the Metabase homepage, they can see their level at the top next to their name. And they can see, so what's the next level for them? So here in this example, I'm just level 2 builder. I can see that the next level for me is expert. And I can sign up for the next class for Analytics Academy. And also at the end of each class, there is a quiz to make sure that people basically can pass the level. And if they pass the level, they automatically get to the next level, which again, here we leverage the user attributes on Metabase.
There's a couple of questions that came in. One, I think it was appropriate for both of you. How often do you have to update your videos to reflect the latest features of the Metabase UI?
So I think I'll take that one just because I'm the one leveraging videos more. This has hurt us before. This has definitely been a pain point, but mostly like the features don't change that often, right? So when a new release comes, it's generally just adding a feature, not really changing the existing features. So I think only once, and it was pretty recent, there was a Metabase release that caused us to really re-record stuff. So I would say it does hurt you, but not super often.
And then what version of Metabase are either of you running?
The latest one for us, always. Try to update as quickly as possible.
Can I? Yeah, I have a question for you, JM. I was just thinking, with the customizations you guys do, does that make upgrading a bit of a pain?
So it was way more painful in the past. It got way better. I think Metabase did a lot of progress on like how code is organized and packages are just organized. And so yes, every time we know we have to merge a few conflicts, but these past 2 or 3 major upgrades, it was not too painful. But again, that's the downside of having all these great features. So it's totally something that we want to manage.
Great. And there's a question about doing an introduction dashboard. So as JM mentioned, they've customized Metabase quite a bit. If you're on our Pro or Enterprise plan, we also offer an option for you to change the landing page or the page that people go to. So you can actually change that page to be a dashboard or some other piece of content within Metabase. And Wayde's done a really fascinating job of using a dashboard, but using a lot of markup language to give a lot of additional information. So I'll post a link in the chat to the help documentation around that feature if anyone's interested. So thank you both.
Maybe next, Wayde, I would love to hear like if you have some partners within your organization that helps you like evangelize analytics, Metabase adoption, because like we have some stuff, but I'm super interested to hear about that on your end.
Yeah, so I mean, I think let me explain about like our Slack channel and a little bit of the history there and how we have like data champions got involved. Maybe it's a good segue for that. Let me share my screen. Cool. Okay, so yeah. Basically, what happened is when we migrated to Metabase, we wanted to create a space for users to ask questions, and we wanted it to be like as easy and as natural as possible for them to ask these questions, right? So that kind of ruled out using our own, like our normal data Slack channel, right, for these communications, because we thought that the conversations would be a bit diluted, and also like it maybe wouldn't be as welcoming to new questions as it could be. So we also wanted a space where we could like, you know, talk about new dashboards or new features from Metabase and you know, those kind of topics. So we created the Slack channel. And to be honest, like at the very beginning, like it was kind of flat and dead. It was basically the data team talking to the data team, right? But what we found was that when people started using Metabase, like the questions started trickling in. And so what happened was eventually, like we got to the point where non-data people were answering like other non-data people's questions about Metabase. And, you know, like we really started building a community. And so like, on your point about having people evangelize this data, yeah, we really achieved that through like things like this, right? So building the Slack channel, having the community, answering people's questions, using metadata actually to find these top users, like as you were talking about in your landing dashboard. I think I plan to talk about it a little bit later, but we spotted these top users, and so we could reach out to them and like speak to them, you know, like, you know, with that whole product-led approach, speak to your users, find out the feedback, and we'd find out what like how they became these power users, right? Like, and so we would, you know, try and copy what worked for them and try and apply it for other people as well, right? So was it a workshop that went really well? Was it like a teammate who built a dashboard, and can we support that? You know, can we make the dashboard better? Can we tell other people about the dashboard? So those kinds of things. Yeah, we really did, like, we built that muscle, and it took quite a lot of effort, right? It's not one of those things, like a lot of these other things are features that you build and then you can just leave it. But building the community and like building up these champions is something that you really need to like work on, right? It like requires a lot of work and a lot of paying attention. And I think it's a little bit of a harder problem to solve than the others, which is quite cool. And yeah, it also lets your knowledge scale, right? So what happens is you get to teach these people, and they get to teach their people, and yeah, it just builds more champions, which yeah, it's just a very harmonious cycle, which is pretty great. Yeah.
I agree. I think having people, like just in terms of like scaling the knowledge across the company, especially if it's a company that grows fast, I mean, you have to have these people. Otherwise, just one central team cannot do everything. We have, of course, like similar channels on Slack to support people's question. And now we try to leverage more and more our communities of like partners across the company. Like we have two types of partners within Datadog. Show you. So that's our communities that we try to animate, and we have data analysts. So until last year, basically, we managed to have only the internal analytics department supporting everything around analytics for the entire company, meaning exposing data that people need and also building the reports. But of course, that's not scalable. And also, once we reach like a few thousand people, one central team cannot have the domain expertise for every department, for marketing, finance, engineering, products, recruiting as well. So what we did is that we started to help these departments hire their own specialized data analysts who are reporting to their own departments, are aligned with their priorities, and who are able to help their teammates speaking the same language and also like being aligned with the different projects with them. And that works super well. We actually started with recruiting because it was such like a standalone department with their own data set, not really related to the rest, and it was hard for us to support them. And it was the best success story ever. Like now we have a recruiting analytics team within this department, and I think that's one of the most data-driven departments at Datadog for tech recruiting. Like data users are using Metabase every single day, and it's thanks to this team. I don't think we could have achieved that just ourselves alone as a central team supporting the entire business. And so in 1 year, like 1 year and a half, we managed to recruit for other departments 10 specialized data analysts across 7 departments. And I keep like talking to executives in all the departments to increase these. We had our first data analyst summit in September, where people like all these special data analysts gathers and share their experience. And just it's important because we don't want them to feel isolated, because it's usually small teams. So we want them to feel part of a community while they are growing their own team. And the second community we have, that I spoke about it briefly before, is analytics ambassadors. These people are not data analysts, but they are kind of analytics savvy people in departments who are interested in growing skills around analytics and helping their teammates. And so we help them with the reporting. They are our main point of contact in their teams. And today we have like about 17 analytics ambassadors across 11 departments. And these two communities are the ones helping us in terms of documentation, evangelization, and also making sure that basically everyone has the right report, which we cannot just achieve with just one central team.
Yeah, so I think like at Onefootball, we kind of are along that journey. I think we're not there yet. So we have like a semi-decentralized approach where everyone is still part of all the analysts rather are part of the core data team, but we do have areas of focus, right? So we are still trying to keep up with the growth of the company, and we're still managing to. But yeah, I think as the team grows, as the company grows, a more decentralized approach, like what you mentioned, is the way to go, I think.
Yeah, and for us, it's interesting because, of course, like over the past couple of years, there was a lot of articles around the data mesh philosophy, having departments like even having their own data engineers and then data analysts. So I think I don't think there is a miracle recipe. I think it depends on the type of company, the business, the needs. For us, like I think today we're in a good spot with like having still the internal analytics department being responsible for exposing data. And even now we start to let other teams expose their own data on their own. I can talk about it after. But I think for data analysts, it was like really obvious that we needed to basically decentralize the data analysts to other departments. And it works well now. Maybe I can show like quickly like what I mean by like self-serving also data intake. So it's not only about building reports, but since we won't, I mean, Metabase is useless if you don't have the right data, right? So we want to make sure that people can quickly have access to the data they need, even if our team hasn't exposed this data yet. So we built a system that we call Bring Your Own Data, BYOD. and where people we have some connectors with like the most commonly used data stores, Google Sheets, Cloud Storage, and some other databases. And we let them on their own make a pull request that will basically say, okay, take this data from that I'm storing here and put it in your warehouse so I can play with it in Metabase or in some notebooks. Because we realize that especially for engineering teams and product teams, they are sitting on a ton of data that could be super useful for themselves or for the rest of the company. And we don't want to be a blocker in between them sitting on this data and making it available for analytics. So we build this system where they can on their own expose it. And we are even expanding that to just having an intake platform where we would want, like in a few quarters, people to go on a web app, browse all the data available. If they cannot find what they need, they can point and click and say, import this data from this system, and not just data stores here, but like also business systems like Salesforce, Zendesk, or Greenhouse, but them being fully autonomous on also exposing the data, even deciding who should have access to the data in terms of data permissioning, and then reporting. So we are really expanding the self-serve aspect beyond just reporting.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely not there yet at Onefootball. But yeah, like definitely on our radar. I would love to quickly just talk about how we measure success of our user adoption. So let me share my screen.
Wayde, while you're pulling that up, if you don't mind, JM, if I could ask you a quick question that we got in. Regarding your bring your own data, who's leading the transformation about data before sending it to Metabase? And then how do you do it? Is there any control on the data side as well?
Good question. Yes. So before people can expose the data, of course, there is like a phase of like review where we make sure that the data based on this sensitivity goes to the right schema in our warehouse with the right permission on it. In terms of transformation for purely BYOD, we count on the team to just to just load the data that will be immediately available, useful to them. And if they need to do some basic transformation, they will just do it on Metabase. That being said, now we are also deploying dbt for data modeling, especially in the paradigm of extract, load, and transform, which BYOD is part of. And we also want to then open dbt so people can build their views and do any data modeling they need, cleaning, transformation, adding business logic before it gets exposed to Metabase to other users. So for now, like still early stage on that. Right now, we still control it a lot in terms of permissioning and what the data looks like. But then we want to also like give more ownership, especially to data analysts, not just any team, but like data analysts who they know about data modeling, they know what makes data easy to use in the BI tool. So we want to let them also build their own views on dbt in the future and own basically the entire pipeline from the data intake, the transformation, and then the reporting on Metabase.
Great, thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
Cool. Right. So let me share my screen again. And I hope you're all enjoying our very, very loud branding. This is Onefootball branding. But basically, yeah, so early on, I spoke about how we use metadata to surface like dashboards to our users. Another use case that we have is to measure and improve adoption. So this is quite a cool use of the metadata. And I just wanted to show you guys how we basically do analytics on our analytics, right? So yeah, as you can see on the left-hand side, this is how we track our adoption. So our key metric for adoption is weekly active users, right? So we look at this. We also break it down into new, resurrected, and returning users. So this allows us to understand like the development of these things, and also stops us from patting ourselves on the back for having a whole bunch of new users increase their weekly active users. We also look at the usage by team. So with Metabase, you get assigned a permission group, right? And so for us, this is largely one-to-one with the team. And so what's nice about understanding this is that we get to spot like areas of concern, like our team's not using Metabase. So then we would step in and give them a little bit more attention. Or, you know, the opposite is a team suddenly suddenly using it where they weren't using it before. And then we want to dive in there and understand like what's working and how we can replicate that. We also look at it to look at like particular dashboards like of interest. So, you know, before I mentioned the World Cup and the World Cup dashboard, like that is right now quite a interesting dashboard for us. So we are busy looking at like, are our users actually using it? And then again, there's the top users using metadata to understand that. So we can understand our power users, find future data champions, and also try and replicate the success that we have with these people for other people. Yeah, like it's quite cool. We also use the metadata to help us with maintenance, right? So maintenance is very important when it comes to like your BI layer. Over here, you can see we use the usage data to understand when our users are using Metabase, right? So what this allows us to do is it allows us to maybe plan our dependencies, right? So we also use dbt at Onefootball, and so we need to schedule the dbt run for the day, and so we obviously need to do it so that it finishes in time, so that when the users start using Metabase, all the data is processed. We also keep a track on how long, like Metabase performance as a whole, not just the individual questions, so that we can understand, you know, is performance becoming a pain point? And like you can't really see because it's blue and blue, which is my bad. I really should have thought about that. But recently we started noticing performance degradation, right? And so what we did is we had to scale up our resources, and yeah, you can see it. Yeah, us using the data to make the user experience better. On the right-hand side, you can see how we use it to fix like particular questions. So in the top, you see broken cards. So sometimes maybe you refactored a model in dbt, but you were silly and didn't check the dependencies. Now you broke a question. With this, using the metadata, we can actually see that and fix it. And then also long-running questions, we also keep an eye on, because obviously performance is a big, like having friction kills user adoption, right? So if your questions take long to load, people really just won't use it. So we keep an eye on that. And so maybe we will go in and optimize the query or build a dbt model that better answers that question. Yeah, and I mean, look, this is just some of the stuff that we can do with the metadata. There's a lot of resources out there, a lot of people talking about it, and a lot of fun things you can do. So I would encourage anyone who uses Metabase to get involved with the metadata. And JM, I think you also had something up your sleeve when it came to metadata beyond the stuff that you've shown us already. Do you maybe want to?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, totally. Like we are analytics people. If we didn't like track our own stuff, we would be like bad analytics people, I think. So same thing. Yeah, we do the same. Let me show you what it looks like. So in terms of adoption, of course, we track adoption. So same, we use Metabase. So I didn't have like a too detailed slide like you Wayde, but like we track by departments. So active users, how many total users, active users over the past 30 days, monthly active users. Also in terms of like of engagements, not only people accessing Metabase and doing viewing some report, but also building dashboards and questions. Because it's important to see, like, do people actually self-serve to the point where they also create reports for their own team, which is super interesting for us. And like you were saying, trying to identify top users, power users, then we can talk to them to maybe become analytics ambassadors. Super important. also for performance, so you said, so for us, we are Datadog. So in terms of like monitoring performance, we kind of use our own products. We like to dog food. So most of the things are on Datadog in terms of like query performance. We have some SLOs. We still have some things around like number of queries being sent to each table to try to identify some insights and how we could also like better model some data sets. For this, we still have some on Metabase as well, just like you. But yeah, I think tracking adoption is important, not just for usage. We also have a dashboard for Analytics Academy, tracking how many people attend the classes, do people also like which levels everyone is in, very important. And maybe it's also last thing also I wanted to add is for increasing adoption. We also try to get a bit funny, like when there are occasions. So we try to have ways to attract more people to Metabase outside of work. So for example, for Halloween, we had like candies that people could take at the front desk. And then they had a QR code, and then they could just basically go in the Google form and rate the candies, the one they preferred or not. And we basically pulled that data, which was just in the end in the Google Sheets, put it in our warehouse and like built a dashboard Metabase where people could see like the best rating candies, the worst one. Also, there is one like the hour of the day when they submitted that, and you can see that people basically eat candies right before lunch and a bit after lunch, more than the end of the day. And that was kind of successful. Then I think that led to like 60 or 50 users creating a Metabase account at Datadog. So it's still like something, and at least we get some smiles on people's face.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I think you need to get creative, right? Like you can't just, if you build it, they will come. That like they won't. And you need to keep your eye on it. You need to put energy into it. You need to have ownership of it. I think for us, initially we when we adopted Metabase, there were only 3 analysts in the company. So there we all felt ownership of the space. But as the team's grown, because I think we're around 20 people now, we needed to assign ownership, so that people could be this proactive thing in dealing with Metabase, right? Like you need to, get your hands dirty, try things out. Some things won't work, but some things will, and you need to learn from that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I know we're running a little over time. If you don't mind answering one more question before we go, the two of you, or did you have other things? I think that were you both at the end? Okay, great. Love to got a question about, apart from, I know JM, you showed organizing your collections by business domain. Do you have a naming convention for questions within Metabase, or other ways to try to get people to better organize their information in Metabase? Love to hear from both of you about how you're managing that.
Want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So right now we don't have a naming convention. So as I mentioned, we're semi-decentralized, so we're all still part of the same team. So it's all like it's 95% analyst built. So we're in control of the naming, and generally we name things in a similar way to how we name things in like DBT or somewhere else, right? So we try and keep things as consistent as possible. I think what would happen is, as we become more decentralized, we would need to like formalize the naming procedure just to make sure, you need the guardrails in place. So yeah, we don't need them as much now in this stage of where we're at, but we will in the future, no doubt.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially to come back to what we discussed at the beginning of the chat about report discovery. Since people are going to use a search, having everyone creating content and reports with the right name is going to help dramatically people find the content that they are interested in, and also avoid people rebuilding something that already exists and reinventing the wheel. So for us, we have, I can show you quickly, I think it's on Confluence here. So we have some data visualization style, which includes like how to build a nice dashboard, like visually speaking, but also we have something about like, I think about text, like the titles for dashboards and descriptions, and some examples at what's good and what's meh. Even for section titles and questions. For questions, for example, like we want to encourage people to think about, okay, what's the time granularity, the key metric, the aggregation, and the filters, and have like an example here, like monthly page views on specific page by user role. Like everything with documentation, like it's nice to have it somewhere, but you need to have people being aware of it. I think we can do better on that end. I think when you save a question on a dashboard, there is a link to the style guide. I'm pretty sure. If not, that's an idea. I'm going to send it to the team. But yeah, we try. It's never perfect in terms of like convention, but at least we try.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. I learned so much today and really appreciate both of your time, answering your questions and transparency about what you're doing in the organization. So on behalf of Metabase, I appreciate all of you who attended as well or watching this later on a recording. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Wayde.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.